You're standing in wet grass at first light, and about 60 feet in front of you is a dead antelope. It isn't your kill. You can hear the animal that made it breathing somewhere in the brush to your left, close enough that you can smell it. Your children ate nothing yesterday, nothing the day before that either, and the meat in front of you is still warm. Your hands are shaking, and it isn't fear. It's 4 days without food doing arithmetic in your muscles. You already know how long it takes to strip a hind leg. You already know how far you can run carrying it. So here's the only question that matters this morning. Do you walk toward it? If you're an early human, you already know the answer. You walk. You walk fast, you grab what you can carry, and you run. That isn't a moral failure. That's rule number 1 of staying alive, and your species followed it for so long that scientists can still see it written on the bones they dig up. Now do the same thing today. Walk up to a dead animal on the side of a road in most American states, cut the meat off it, and take it home to feed your kids. In a lot of those states, you've just committed a crime. Some places will fine you, some will take you in. That's the strange thing about ancient survival. Every single rule that kept your ancestors breathing has been turned into something you can be arrested for. Not 1 or 2 of them, all of them. 10 rules, 10 crimes. Some of them you'd break without thinking twice. 1 or 2 of them you'd swear you never would, right up until the moment you did. And by the end of this, you're going to understand something uncomfortable about the world you actually live in. But there's a detail that changes this whole story, and almost nobody notices it. These rules weren't outlawed because we decided they were evil. Most of them were never considered evil at all. They became crimes for a completely different reason. And when scientists worked out what that reason was, it stopped being a story about savages and became a story about you. Because the rules didn't die when the laws arrived. They got buried underneath them. And a few of them are still running inside your body right now. Let's start with the one you already broke in your head 30 seconds ago. For a long time, the story we told about early humans was flattering. Brave hunters, spears, working together, bringing down something enormous, feeding the whole camp. Then, scientists looked closely at the animal bones from ancient campsites, and the story got messier. They found stone tool marks on the bones. That part was expected. What they didn't expect was the order of the damage. On some bones, the tooth marks of big carnivores sit underneath the human cut marks. Something ate first. People came second and took the leftovers. On other bones, the layering runs the opposite way. Human cut marks underneath, carnivore teeth on top. People got there first that time, took what they wanted, and something else finished the rest. So this wasn't one behavior. It was a switch. Hunt when hunting is worth it, steal when stealing is cheaper, and stay flexible enough to do either before breakfast. That flexibility is the actual advantage, and it was brilliant. A predator does the dangerous part. You do the cheap part. You get calories without risking your life, and calories were the entire game. This is one of the reasons early humans spread across the planet while stronger animals didn't. Not strength, timing. Now here's the part that should annoy you. In much of the modern world, that exact behavior is illegal. In the United States, whether you can legally take a dead animal you find depends entirely on which state line you're standing on. And in many of them, you need a permit before you touch it. Some states require you to call an officer first. Some ban it outright. Sell that meat to anyone, anywhere, and you've moved into serious criminal territory almost everywhere on Earth. The reasoning today is sensible. Disease, poaching cover stories, food safety. A dead animal of unknown age can genuinely kill you, but sit with the size of the change. The single most reliable way our ancestors got fat and protein for a very long stretch of human existence now requires paperwork. And that raises a question that keeps coming back through this whole list. If free meat lying in the open is illegal, what happens when you go get it yourself? Ice Age hunter-gatherers had no calendar telling them what was in season. No permit, no bag limit, no list of protected animals. If it had meat on it and you could get close enough, it was food. We know exactly what they took because the bones piled up in their camps. Mammoth, woolly rhino, cave bear, cave lion, wild horse, aurochs, the enormous wild cattle that no longer exist at all. They took nesting birds. They took eggs straight out of nests. They took shellfish by the thousands. And when the opportunity was big enough, they didn't take one animal. They took the herd. At sites like Solutre in France, the bones of wild horses accumulated in enormous quantities, killed in the same place over and over across generations. Get a herd moving in the wrong direction, into a bottleneck they can't turn around in, and a single afternoon feeds a camp for weeks. Nothing about that was reckless in their world. It was the only sane strategy. You cannot store meat through a bad winter without technology you don't have. So the rule was simple. Take it when you see it, because you might not see it again. Line that up against modern law, and it's almost funny. Hunt without a license today, and you're committing a crime in nearly every country on Earth. Hunt out of season, that's another one. Exceed your limit, another. And the animals that were the biggest prizes of the Stone Age have modern equivalents that are now the most protected animals alive. Elephants, rhinos, big cats. Kill one and you're not paying a fine. You're going to prison, sometimes for years. Then there's the detail that makes people's mouths open. In the United States, under the law protecting migratory birds, it's illegal to simply possess the feathers or eggs of most wild bird species. Not hunt, not kill, possess. A feather you found on the ground can technically make you an offender. Your ancestors robbed nests for breakfast. You can be prosecuted for keeping a feather. If uncovering the forgotten rules of early humans is your kind of thing, hit subscribe right now, because the next one is where this stops being about food and starts being about the body. Everything so far has been about getting something into your hands. Meat, eggs, calories. Now watch what happened when food wasn't the problem, and the problem was the person lying on the ground in front of you. You take a blow to the head. Maybe a fall, maybe a fight, maybe a hoof. Nothing looks catastrophic from outside, but blood is collecting inside your skull. Pressure is building, and you're slipping away. Everybody watching knows what's happening. They've seen it before, and they have exactly one option. Someone opens your head. The practice is called trepanation, and this is not a rare curiosity. Archaeologists have found hundreds of skulls with deliberate holes cut into them, scattered across Europe and beyond, going back thousands of years into the Stone Age. At Insisheim in France, there's a skull that has two of them. The tool was stone, a flake with an edge on it, worked against the skull until the bone gave way. Scraping, cutting a groove in a circle, drilling a ring of small holes and lifting the piece out. Different regions, different techniques, same target. Now, here's the detail that flips this from horror into something else entirely. The bone around many of those holes shows healing. Smooth, remodeled edges. That doesn't happen to a dead person. It happens to someone who lived long enough for their skull to grow back around the opening. They survived, often, sometimes twice. Think about how much had to go right. Someone scraped through bone without pushing into the brain. Someone knew when to stop. Someone kept the wound clean enough that it didn't rot. And someone was holding the patient still through all of it. That's a procedure performed by people who had done it before, in a world with no anesthetic and no idea that germs existed. And here's what nobody can fully answer. Not every trepaned skull shows an injury. Some of these people had nothing visibly wrong with the bone at all. So something else was being treated. Headaches, seizures, something they believed lived inside the head and needed a way out. We're looking at the results of a theory we can't read. They didn't know why it worked in the way we understand it now. Neurosurgeons still relieve pressure inside the skull today using the same basic principle. Different tools, same problem. But do it yourself now, and there's no argument to make. Operating on a person without a license is a felony practically everywhere on the planet, and the charge sheet doesn't care that you were trying to help. Practicing medicine without a license, aggravated assault. If they die, homicide. The one thing that could save a life in that camp is a thing you would be arrested for attempting. And the same hands that could open a skull without killing the patient were building something else. Something that tells you exactly how much these people understood about what a human body can and can't survive. Here's the problem with hunting a large animal using a sharpened stick. Unless you hit something vital, it runs. It might run for miles. It might survive entirely, and you've spent a day of energy you didn't have to spare. Early humans solved this in a way that's genuinely startling once you understand the chemistry involved. They coated their weapons in poison. In Border Cave in South Africa, researchers found a wooden applicator with chemical residue on it, and the compound they identified comes from the castor bean plant. That artifact is roughly 24,000 years old, and it's one of the oldest pieces of physical evidence we have of humans deliberately using poison. The knowledge never disappeared either. Sand hunters in southern Africa have long used the larva of a specific beetle to make arrow poison, and the way it works is patient rather than instant. The animal doesn't drop, it weakens. So the hunter shoots, then walks after it, sometimes for a day or more, and collects it when it can't run anymore. Notice what poison lets you get away with. A light arrow from a small bow can't punch through the hide and muscle of a big animal deeply enough to kill it outright. Poison makes the depth irrelevant. You no longer need a killing shot. You need a scratch that carries something into the blood. A weak weapon becomes a lethal one, and the hunter never has to get close. And it creates a second problem you have to solve before you eat. The meat around the wound is now contaminated, so hunters cut it away and discard it before butchering the rest. Every part of this has to be managed, or the thing you built to kill the animal kills your family instead. Understand what that requires. You need to know which plant, which insect, which stage of its life cycle, how much to use, where on the arrow to put it, and how to handle it without killing yourself. That isn't primitive. That's applied science, passed down by voice for thousands of years without a single written page. And now, poisoned projectiles are banned in hunting regulations across essentially the entire developed world. Not restricted, banned. Depending on what you used and where you are, possession of certain toxins on its own is a criminal offense. And if a person is anywhere in the picture, the charge stops being about wildlife and starts being about attempted murder. The most sophisticated hunting technology of the Stone Age is now the kind of thing that gets a case file. But poison only helps you once you've found the animal. So what did you do when the animal stopped coming at all? You changed the land. Most people picture prehistoric fire as one small flame in one small cave, a circle of people huddled around it. That isn't the whole story. Early humans didn't just carry fire. They used it as a weapon against entire landscapes. The technique is beautifully simple. You set the grassland alight and let it move. Animals run ahead of the flames in a direction you already chose, straight toward your hunters or straight into a place they can't escape. That's one meal. But the second effect is the clever one. Burned ground grows back fast and green, and fresh green growth pulls grazing animals in. So you're not just hunting today. You're building a place animals will keep coming back to for years. You're farming meat without owning a single animal. We know this happened because the evidence is still in the ground. Charcoal layers turn up in patterns that don't match natural lightning fires, and Aboriginal Australians have used deliberate landscape burning for so long and so precisely that fire authorities today actively study those methods to control the wildfires that keep destroying modern towns. Read that again, because it's the strangest sentence on this list. Modern governments are quietly learning ancient fire from the same practices modern law forbids you to carry out. Because that's exactly where it stands. Start an unauthorized fire on open land, and you're looking at serious charges. If it spreads, if it damages property, if anyone gets hurt, the word for what you did is arson. People go to prison for decades for it. Even a legal controlled burn now needs permits, certified crews, and a weather window signed off in advance. And there's a cost to that we're only now adding up. Take regular small fires out of a landscape, and the fuel doesn't disappear. It accumulates year after year until it burns all at once on its own terms instead of yours. Some of the worst fire seasons of the modern era are partly a story about what happens when nobody burns anything on purpose anymore. So we've got a technique so effective it shaped continents, and it's now a felony. That's 5 rules about technique: fire, poison, timing, tools, nerve. From here on, the rules stop being about what these people knew and start being about who they were willing to be. Starting with who was allowed to hold the weapons. In the world we've built, childhood is a protected zone. You're fed, housed, schooled, and kept away from anything sharp, and your only real job is to grow up. That version of childhood is extremely new. Scientists studying hunter-gatherer groups to understand how early humans actually lived kept finding the same pattern, and it surprised them. Children weren't waiting on the sidelines to become useful. They were already useful. Among the Hadza in Tanzania, kids go out and get food, and a meaningful share of what a Hadza child eats is food that child collected personally. Small children carry small versions of adult tools. They dig tubers, they knock down fruit. Boys practice with small bows on small targets. And they're not playing in the way we mean playing. They're training. And the training has a deadline, because a bad hunter becomes a hungry adult. And almost none of it is taught the way you were taught. Nobody sits a forager child down and delivers a lesson. The child is simply present, all day, every day, inside the real work of adults, copying what they see and being corrected when it matters. The classroom is the camp. There was no other option. In a camp where every calorie has to be found that day, an 8-year-old who produces nothing is a real cost to everyone else. So childhood ran on a different clock. You learned by doing the actual thing, badly, with real consequences, until you got good. Now imagine explaining that to a modern court. Hand a young child a knife and send them into the wild to bring back their own dinner today, and you're not an old-fashioned parent, you're a case number. Child endangerment, neglect. Depending on the country and the injury, worse. And putting a child to work for the family's food supply runs straight into child labor law, which exists precisely because it used to be normal and people were destroyed by it. Here's the uncomfortable half of this. Those Hadza kids are competent in ways most modern adults aren't. They read tracks. They know which plants are safe. They handle tools without cutting themselves. We didn't ban that competence because it was worthless. We banned the method used to get it. So the children were inside the work, inside the danger, inside the whole of adult life from the beginning. Which means they were inside something else too. Something we now spend enormous effort keeping children away from. The dead. Around 9,000 years ago, in what's now Turkey, people built one of the first towns we know of, Çatalhöyük. Mud brick houses packed so tightly together that in places you moved around the settlement by walking across the roofs. When archaeologists dug into the floors of those houses, they found the residents. The dead were buried inside the homes, under the floors. In a number of cases, directly beneath the raised platforms the living slept on. You lay down at night on top of your grandmother. And that wasn't the end of the relationship. Some burials were reopened later and skulls were taken out and kept. In the wider region, at Jericho and other sites, people took human skulls and packed plaster over them, molding facial features onto the bone, sometimes setting shells into the eye sockets. Faces rebuilt on the actual heads of the dead, kept where people lived. Try to see it from inside that house instead of from outside it. Your family didn't leave. The people who taught you which plants to eat, who this house belonged to before you, who your right to be here comes from, they're still under your feet. In a world with no documents and no deeds, the bones in the floor are the proof of who you are. Modern law has closed that door completely. Burial is regulated everywhere. Licensed grounds, permits, paperwork, certificates. Put a body under your floorboards today and you're facing charges for unlawful disposal of remains and obstruction. And every investigator involved will assume the worst about how that person died until you prove otherwise. In many places, owning human remains at all requires authorization you almost certainly don't have. And here's the small, sharp irony in it. The archaeologists who lift those bodies out of those floors need licenses to do it. In Britain, digging up human remains requires permission from the government before a single trowel goes into the ground. The dead that a Stone Age family kept under the bed are now protected by more paperwork than the house was. Ancient people slept above their ancestors and considered it home. But keeping the dead close is one thing. There's a place where it went considerably further, and the evidence for it is not ambiguous. In Cheddar Gorge in England, there's a cave called Gough's Cave. What came out of it from around 14,700 years ago is some of the clearest evidence of its kind anywhere in the world. Human bones, covered in cut marks made by stone tools. Long bones cracked open along their length, the way you break a bone to get at the marrow inside. Chew marks on human bone made by human teeth. And the skulls. Several of them had been carefully worked, the faces removed, the edges trimmed and smoothed, leaving the top of the cranium shaped into a bowl. Cups, made from the heads of people. There's more. One of the human bones from that cave, a piece of forearm, carries a deliberate zigzag pattern carved into its surface. Somebody sat down and decorated it. The instinct is to call this monstrous, and I understand it. But look at the work involved, because the work is what tells you what was going on. Sloppy, panicked butchery looks different from this. This is careful. These are skilled hands doing something they'd done before, following steps in an order. There's real debate about what drove it. Starvation is one answer, and in a hard winter, it's an obvious one, because a body is the last calories in the camp. But hunger doesn't explain why someone would spend hours shaping a skull into a smooth-edged vessel. That isn't eating, that's ritual. Keeping something, perhaps honoring it. The truthful answer is that we don't fully know, and anyone who tells you they're certain is selling you something. What we do know is that it happened, and that the people doing it weren't confused about who they were handling. These were people from their own community, faces they knew. Today, there's no version of this that isn't criminal. Desecration of a corpse, unlawful interference with human remains, prevention of a lawful burial. Countries phrase it differently, but the outcome is uniform. And if the death itself was arranged, it's murder. So that's the picture you're left holding. People who cracked open their own dead for marrow. It would be very easy to stop here and decide you know exactly what these people were. Don't, because the next discovery is the one that turns this entire list upside down. Picture the worst moment a mobile group can face. Food is gone from this area, the season is turning, and the camp has to move. But someone can't move. A broken leg, a wasting illness, age. Carrying that person means slowing everyone down through the exact stretch of time when speed is what keeps children alive. Staying means the whole group sits in a place with no food left in it. There's no clever solution. Somebody chooses. And in the harshest environments humans ever occupied, that choice sometimes went the way you're afraid of. In Arctic communities, during genuine famine, there are accounts of the very old being left behind, or choosing to be left. It's worth being precise here. This was the extreme edge of scarcity, not routine practice, and it happened when the alternative was children dying. Now here's the part I actually wanted to get to. The evidence mostly points the other way. There's a Neanderthal known as Shanidar I, found in Iraq. His injuries are severe, a withered, useless arm, damage suggesting he was blind on one side, more trauma across his body. He didn't die from any of it. The bone had healed. He lived years like that. In Italy, there's a young man called Romito II, buried around 11,000 years ago, who had a form of dwarfism that would have made it impossible for him to hunt the way everyone else did. Neither of these people could have survived alone for a week. Somebody fed them. Somebody moved at their pace for years. That's the discovery that should stop you. In the most brutal conditions our species has ever faced, with no medicine, no surplus, and nobody watching to judge them, hunter-gatherers regularly chose to carry the people who couldn't carry themselves. And think about what that commitment actually costs a group with nothing spare. Every mouthful going to someone who can't hunt is a mouthful nobody else gets. Every day spent moving slowly is a day of risk. They paid it anyway, repeatedly, in different parts of the world across thousands of years. That's not sentiment. That's a decision made over and over by people who could count. Today, walking away from someone in your care is a crime with a name: neglect, abandonment, failure to provide the necessaries of life. We had to write that into law. They did it without the law. Which leaves one last question. If there were no police, no courts, and no prisons, what happened to the person who kept hurting people? Small hunter-gatherer bands had no chief with power over life and death, no jail, and no way to remove a dangerous person from the community and hold them somewhere. But they weren't defenseless, and they weren't disorganized. They had gossip, shame, avoidance, and public ridicule. And in a group of a few dozen people where you depend on everyone around you for food, that pressure is enormous. Most problems ended right there. Then there were the ones that didn't. Anthropologist Richard Lee, working among the Jew/Hawansi of the Kalahari, recorded what happened with a man who had already killed twice. Talking hadn't worked. Avoidance hadn't worked. Eventually, the group acted together and he was killed. And afterward, according to the account, people came forward and put a spear into the body, one after another. That detail is the whole point. If everyone strikes, no single person is the killer. There's no one family to blame, no one person to take revenge against, no feud to start. The community carried the act together so that it couldn't tear them apart. That isn't chaos. That's a justice system built by people who understood exactly what an unresolved killing does to a group that has to keep living side by side afterward. And it's the single fastest route to a life sentence in the modern world. Conspiracy, murder. Every person who took part charged individually. And the fact that the man was violent and everyone agreed makes no legal difference whatsoever. We call it a lynching, and we built entire institutions specifically to make sure it never happens again. So there it is, 10 rules: scavenging, unlimited hunting, opening skulls, poisoning weapons, burning the land, arming children, keeping the dead, eating the dead, choosing who gets left behind, and executing the dangerous. Every one of them worked. Every one of them kept somebody alive who would otherwise have died. And every one of them is now a crime you could be charged with before the end of the week. Which finally brings us to the question this whole thing has been circling. Why? Here's the answer, and it isn't the one most people expect. We didn't outlaw these rules because we became better people. We outlawed them because we stopped needing them. Look at what each one actually solves. Scavenging solves no refrigeration. Unlimited hunting solves no stored food. Skull surgery solves no hospital. Poison solves no rifle. Landscape burning solves no fenced fields. Working children solve no farming surplus. Burying your dead at home solves no cemetery, no records, no proof of who you are. Eating them solves a winter with nothing left in it. Choosing who to carry solves no ambulance. Group execution solves no police. Every rule on this list is an answer to a shortage. Take away the shortage and the rule stops being wisdom and becomes a danger to everyone around you. That's what a law is, most of the time. It's the fossil of a problem we finally solved. And that means these rules didn't vanish. They're sitting one bad week away inside every one of us. You can watch it happen. When a city loses power for 4 days, people stop treating property the way they did on day one. When food actually runs out, the rules change fast, and they change in the direction of this list. Not because civilization is fake, but because civilization is a set of tools for handling abundance, and the older toolkit is still in the drawer underneath. And notice which direction the change runs. Nobody has to be taught these rules. They're what people arrive at independently whenever the safety net disappears. The laws are the thing that has to be taught, written down, enforced, and repeated, because the laws are the newer layer. You're carrying the proof right now. Your body stores fat because your ancestors could not count on tomorrow's meal. Your brain rewards you for sugar and fat long past the point where it does you any good for the same reason. You feel a pull to share food with the people you care about, and that instinct is older than any language on Earth, because sharing meat was the insurance policy that carried hunter-gatherers through the seasons when hunting failed. You flinch at a shape moving in the dark because the ones who didn't flinch didn't live long enough to have children. You aren't a modern person who happens to know some history. You're a Stone Age animal living inside a world it built and then outgrew, running survival software that hasn't been updated in 50,000 years. That's what these 10 rules really are. Not savagery, not a list of crimes. They're the operating manual your body still reads when the lights go out. 10 answers to 10 shortages, written by people who had no margin for a wrong one, and kept because they worked. Every one of these rules is illegal now, but the only reason anyone was ever alive to write those laws is that your ancestors broke every single one of them first.